Design shapes the way you live. I'm Nico, an interior design expert focused on the connection between home and well-being. Using science, design, and professional expertise, I'll help you shape a space that elevates your mindset and enhances your well-being. Let's create space for better living, starting now. Welcome back to Your Home by Design. This is episode 64. Today, we're talking about attention, not productivity, not aesthetics, not trends, attention. Because your home is either protecting your attention or it's stealing it. And most of us don't even realize it's happening. This episode is about one very specific type of space, a listening room. But this isn't really about music. It's about intentionality. It's about ritual. It's about designing a space that trains you to slow down instead of speed up. Here's where we're going today. I'm going to start with a story because this idea is deeply personal to me. Then we'll look briefly at the history of listening rooms and why we used to design homes very differently. I'll share research around attention, environmental cueing, and why multi-use spaces fragment your focus. And then I'll walk you through how to design a listening room in a way that feels layered, story-driven, and aligned with who you are. And toward the end, I'll leave you with a few quotes that tie this all together because design is a choice and how we choose matters. Have you ever been in a room where the purpose is so clear, where you know exactly what that room is for? If you're anything like me, you probably grew up with a room like this, or you knew of one in a friend's home. That room that had a stillness to it, a touch of formal, tucked away slightly, a room you maybe weren't allowed to play in or even hang out in. One or two adults would sit there. They didn't do much talking. If guests came over, that's where they'd go. When I was a kid, we had a room like this. It had a curved sectional, large wood-burning fireplace, an oversized stereo and record player on display, almost like art, and a table stacked with encyclopedias. There wasn't a TV in the room. You went in there to listen, to read, and to sit, or to visit with guests. There was something about the restraint of it. You knew when you were a kid, it wasn't the most exciting room in the house. You probably didn't really want to go in there too much because you knew exactly what it was used for and you knew what it wasn't used for. And I think over time, we've lost that. The open plan living came in strong and everyone loved it. You know, everyone welcome everywhere, all things done in all rooms. It really felt like connection, like the home is open. We can go and be and do in any space. Everyone's welcome. But what we lost were boundaries. And when we lose boundaries, we lose attention. When I was a kid, I would spend my weekends at my dad's and my stepmom's. And often my stepmom and I would go for drives. We would do market runs, we would do errands, and we lived sort of out of the way, sort of more in the country. So when we would go for a drive, it would take us some time to get to where we were going. And on our drives, my stepmom would often play music. She would put in a CD, and the choice of music was never really mine, but she would throw in all different genres from like Canadian folk to Edith Piaf to Broadway musicals. And she would often tell me stories about the songs and about the musicians and, you know, fun facts of like what they overcame to get to where they were. And I always learned so much on those drives. The other day I was playing French music and my daughter and her friend, she had a friend over and they said, "Why are we listening to this? Like we can't even understand what they're saying." And I paused because I remembered those drives. And music, it's not always about understanding the words, right? I mean, you don't need to translate every lyric to be able to feel the music. You don't need to be able to grasp every phrase to experience awe or whatever the emotion the song is portraying. You know, it's felt. There's a reaction, a physical shift, right? And Sometimes you just sit a little straighter. Sometimes your shoulders drop. Sometimes you get goosebumps. There's that physical reaction that's happening. Even if you don't fully understand it, your body does. And design is the same. We don't always consciously understand why a space makes us feel calm or uninspired or distracted or uneasy. We might not have the language for it, but we do feel it. And our nervous system responds, our posture shifts, our breathing changes, our behavior can follow. So a room can train you in so many ways. It can train you to move faster. It can train you to slow down. It can train you to multitask, to disconnect, to focus, to gather. It can train you to socialize. It can train you to be healthier. And just like that French music, even if you can't translate the design choices, you are reacting to them. There is a response happening. That's why listening rooms matter. Because when we design for immersion, we design for intent, for participation, for stillness, we are designing for a feeling. When I was a kid, I would spend weekends at my dad's and my stepmom's. And often my stepmom and I would go for drives. We would do errands and market runs. And where we lived, we were sort of out of the way. We were more in the country. So wherever we would go, it would often take us some time to get there. On our drives, my stepmom would play music. She would put a CD in, and the music was often not my choice. She would just put something in and off we would go. But we would listen to all sorts of genres and, anything from Canadian folk to Edith Piaf and Broadway musicals. And she would tell me stories about the songs or about the musicians and fun little facts about what they'd overcome to get to where they are. And the other day, and she would tell me stories about the songs, about the musicians, and fun little facts about what they had overcome to get to where they were. And the other day, I was playing French music, and my daughter and her friend said, "Why are we listening to this? We can't really understand what they're saying." And I paused because I remembered those drives. I remembered listening to music as a kid where I didn't understand the words. And music isn't always about understanding all of the words. You don't need to translate every single lyric to feel something. You don't need to be able to grasp every phrase to experience the emotion of the song and what the artist is trying to portray, whether that's awe or hope or sadness. It's just felt. There's a reaction, right? There's a physical shift. Even if you don't fully understand it, your body does. You're going to react in certain ways. You might get goosebumps. You might feel excited. You might sit a little straighter. You might ponder things differently. And design is the same. We don't always consciously understand why a space makes us feel certain things. It could make us feel calm. It could cause us to feel uneasy or inspired or distracted. We might not have the language for it, but you feel it. Your nervous system responds, your posture changes, your breath shifts, your behavior follows. A room can train you to move faster. It can train you to be slow. It can train you to multitask, to focus or disconnect, or to be in community and gather. And just like that, French music, even if you can't translate the design choices, you are reacting to them. There is a response happening. That's why listening rooms matter. Because when we design for immersion, for participation, for stillness, we are designing for a feeling. And the way we feel in a space shapes our behavior. That behavior then can shape our lifestyle. Recently, I started a little daily practice, and I call it notebooking. And it sounds simple. It is very simple. But basically, I carry a small notebook around with me. And when something pops into my head, something that I would normally grab my phone to check, I just write it down instead. The other day, I was sitting in my living room. I was looking out the window. It was this beautiful sunny day, and I was just enjoying the moment. And I was looking at my trees in the garden, and I thought, oh, I wonder when I can prune my trees. And normally in a moment like that, I would grab my phone to check. And you know how that goes. You unlock it, you search, you see a notification, you open up a message, you get an email, and on it goes. So you start in one moment and then you end somewhere completely different. You stop being in the moment and that's just reactive, right? So instead, I wrote it down and it took me 3 seconds to write it down. And then I just went back to enjoying sitting and looking out the window. So I decided when I came up with this practice that every few days, I would sit down intentionally with that notebook at my desk without distractions and just go through the list. So some of the things that were on the list, I noticed I don't even need to look up anymore. They were redundant. The urgency had gone away, and other things got sorted. So for instance, pruning my trees went into my garden plan. If I have a thought pop into my head and I write a note about this podcast, I would put it on my podcast note. Design thoughts go into a project folder. So if something needs action, I then get to assign it. I get to add it to my list. And then when the time comes, when I choose to tackle it or look it up, I can do that. So the notebook just allows you to choose. And this is where it connects directly to design. In interior design, we talk about function. Every room should have a clear function. And when function is clear, behavior follows. That's what I'm doing with the notebook. I'm creating a rule. Right? Like this is not the moment to look this up. This is, I'm going to create a time and a place for that. And room rules work in the same way. You've probably heard me talk about room rules before. If a space has no defined function, if everything is allowed everywhere, the brain doesn't know which mode to enter. Are we relaxing right now? Are we focused right now? But when you establish room rules, even if they're subtle, the brain begins to associate. This room is for reading. This table is for working. This room is for listening. So function trains behavior and room rules protect attention. And that's what a listening room is. It's a space with very clear rules, not rigid, not formal, just very intentional. And that intention changes how you use your time. So when we use a room for everything, we use it for music, for TV, for work, for scrolling, for eating even. Your brain gets cues to do multiple things at once. Your brain builds associations. So if the sofa is for TV, scrolling, working, and eating, it doesn't know which mode to enter. And research shows that when one space is used for everything, you experience task switching and attention is depleted. So your brain never fully resets. You're just constantly switching from task to task to task. And when spaces are clearly defined, your brain builds habit loops. A specific chair becomes reading mode. A specific room becomes relax mode. So when we use a room for everything, we use it for listening to music, we use it for TV, for work, for scrolling, for eating. Your brain gets cues to do multiple things at once. So it starts building associations. If the sofa is for TV, and for scrolling and for working and even for eating dinner, it doesn't know which mode to enter. And research shows when one space is used for everything, you just experience task switching and your brain is never fully able to reset. So when spaces are clearly defined, your brain builds habit loops. So a specific chair becomes reading mode. A specific room becomes relax mode. And if you're in a room and you're seeing work-related things when you're in trying to relax, it just keeps your nervous system slightly on. And phones especially are designed to trigger dopamine loops. So when you're seeing a phone, that's what you're going to want to do. And lighting also plays a major role. Harsh LED lighting can disrupt our circadian rhythms and affect melatonin production and keep your nervous system alert. So if possible, when you're in a space, avoid overly cool LED bulbs, right? You want to choose warmer, spectrally optimized bulbs or even halogen where you can. Your environment trains you, right? So a listening room reduces switching, it lowers temptation, and it supports downshifting. It allows awe, and awe pauses normal thinking, and it creates that sense of immersion. So what is a listening room? Well, historically, it began as the drawing room, but the drawing room wasn't actually anything about drawing. It was actually about withdrawing. So after dinner, guests would withdraw from the dining room into a more intimate space. The whole vibe slowed down, conversations softened, and often music began. And the music wasn't just background noise. It wasn't like, well, we're just going to put some nice music on, we're going to enjoy the night. It was like all of the guests participated in the music. So someone played the piano and someone sang, and guests would gather around to listen because they were a part of it. Music was considered like a social skill. So if you owned a piano, the room became like a stage and everyone was a part of it. Then in the early 1900s, gramophones entered the home, and they weren't hidden. They were displayed. They were beautifully housed in wooden cabinets. The sound was the furniture. It was the focal point. Rooms were really arranged around listening. And even before we understood acoustics, people would just intuitively layer drapery and rugs and upholstered furniture to sort of soften the echo and improve the warmth and the intimate feel of the space. And so we understood how it felt before we actually understood the physics of it and what was going on. So what is a listening room? Well, historically, it began as the drawing room, but it wasn't actually about drawing. It was actually about withdrawing. So after dinner, guests would withdraw from the dining room into a more intimate setting. The space allowed them to relax, and it shifted the pace of the evening. Conversation softened, and often music began. So music wasn't just background noise. It was something everyone participated in. So someone would be playing the piano while someone sang, and all the guests would gather around and sing along or listen. And music was considered a social skill. So owning a piano signaled sort of like a refinement. Women were often expected to perform, and the whole room was involved. And then in the early 90s, gramophones entered the home, and they weren't hidden. They were really displayed, and they were often beautifully housed in wooden cabinets. And the sound device was essentially a furniture piece. It was the focal point of the room, and the room was arranged around listening. So even before we really understood the acoustics, people would intuitively layer rugs and drapes and upholstered furniture to soften the echo and add warmth and all of those things. People understood how it felt even before we understood the physics and the science behind it. And then something shifted with the rise of television in the 20th century. Furniture orientation changed, seating turned toward the screen, and listening really became almost secondary. The music was the background and the screen became the foreground. So the room's purpose really evolved. Today, we might call these rooms, a den or a snug, a lounge, but at its core, a listening room is a space designed for withdrawing from noise, from multitasking, from speed. It's the room that really shifts the pace of our day. And I think that's what we're craving again. So when we look at analog activities, I mean, that's like pulling a record from its sleeve, placing the needle, sitting down and enjoying the act of listening to music. That small effort signals importance. And we have to ask ourselves, are we being proactive or reactive in our spaces? Inside my Create Space digital course, every prompt is about being proactive. If you want more slow time, you design for it intentionally, not accidentally. Imagine walking into a room that was created specifically for one ritual, and that's listening to music and relaxing, or listening to music and socializing with guests. Okay, so let's move into the design of a listening room. The first step in any strong design project is creating a concept. A concept statement is a short written paragraph that defines the emotional and functional direction of a space. So it basically answers like, what is this room about? How should it feel? What role does it play in my life? And really a concept statement is what drives all other decisions. So you start with the statement, and then from there you build out a mood board or a concept board. And a concept board or mood board is the visual translation of that concept statement. It's basically a curated collection of colors and textures, imagery and materials and references that bring the concept to life visually. So it ensures that all the design decisions align. And I'll give you an example of what a concept statement could sound like for a listening room. Okay. Envisioned as a dedicated environment for sound and story, this listening room accommodates both meaningful gathering and restorative solo moments. Layered textures, intimate proportions, and character-driven furnishings create a room that feels personal and intentional. The design elevates everyday ritual, allowing music to become shared memory or private retreat. So that paragraph drives every choice. So that's step one, is to develop a great concept, a statement, as well as a visual supporting board. And right now, I mean, you can find Canva. There's so many places that you can use to create a mood board. The second step is walls. Walls are always an opportunity to create interest and to really add to the overall impact of a space. And this can be done just with tones, but in a listening room, you can use wallpaper, which creates intimacy and texture and interest depending on what the pattern is. A listening room is a great space to go with darker tones or jeweled shades. Textured wallpapers can soften acoustics and visually just quiet the room. But you can have fun with, really going with a theme in a room like this, because it's its own little space and it has its own purpose. So have fun with it. You can do like a landscape mural or a painterly wallpaper that introduces that sense of awe. And, a beautiful backdrop that just supports that sense of immersion in the room. So use the walls as an opportunity to play up on a theme. And a great place to do this is a room like a listening room. And the third step is lighting. Lighting in this room should really be layered and warm. So avoid any harsh LED lighting where possible. I always advise people to choose something other than LED just because of the health effects that LEDs can have on us. But so things like spectrally optimized bulbs or even halogen bulbs. But really, avoid that harsh blue light. Use warmer colored bulbs and dimmers. Dimmers are a very cost-effective way to have a big impact on a space. They're easy to switch out. You just immediately can impact the mood of a space by dimming it down. Things like sconces. Sconces are not only a chance to add ambiance, but they also can add interest because you can have a lot of fun with the style of a sconce, the scale of a sconce. So keeping with your theme, if you're going with a theme in the room, a sconce can can really reinforce that theme. Things like table lights, these are great because they're lower and you can have them on all sorts of brightness, and also because they point downwards. Any sort of light that casts a downward light is going to immediately impact the feel of a room. It's going to feel more intimate. It's going to feel more cozy. Yeah, so think pools of light, not floods. Light that feels like evening when it's not. And step 4 is furniture should support posture without encouraging collapse. So, the space should be comfortable, right? But not too soft that you disappear. But seating should orientate towards each other because you want to encourage conversations. So adding conversation zones is really important. And then do what was done in the past where you angle the furniture toward the sound, but not like a TV, like the source of the sound. So if you have a vintage record player or wherever the music is coming from, try to move your furniture around that. Or if you even have some instruments that you can display, if you have a guitar or a piano, think about how you can create a conversation zone where that becomes the focal point of the space. And then step 5 is bring in textiles. Use rugs and curtains and upholstered pieces. I think this is the type of room that you want to create that sense of coziness, and you want to feel like when you get there, you want to stay. So anything that's layered is going to help. So rugs and curtains and mix of upholstery pieces, not only add warmth, but they can absorb sound and just create that sense of intimacy as well. And most importantly, number 6 is to display your story. Always go for story and something that you can incorporate from your own home, something that tells your story, things that you love, things that you're interested in. So for an example, you could display record album covers that you love, use them as art, and include objects that connect to memory. Just surround yourself with things that have meaning and that reinforce your story, that you connect with and that you can share conversation about as well. Home design reflects values. So when you see yourself reflected back, that connection deepens. And if you don't have a separate room, create a corner. Combine analog rituals like reading and music in a single chair and a lamp in a corner of a room, that when you're there, that's what you do. It's not always about square footage. It's just about clarity and making sure you're creating room rules so that your body knows exactly how to respond when it sits in that chair. Every room trains you. Your body trains you how to sleep. Your kitchen trains you how to eat. Your living room trains you how to unwind. What is your home training you to become? I want to leave you with a few words from people who understood that choices shape life. The first one is, I am who I am today because of the choices I made yesterday, from Eleanor Roosevelt. The next one is either run the day or the day runs you, by Jim Rohn. And one more that feels especially relevant here is we can't become what we need to be by remaining what we are, by Oprah Winfrey. Design is choice. Attention is choice. Your home can either fragment your focus or protect it. If this episode stirred something in you, I encourage you to look at one room in your home this week and ask, what is this room teaching me? Is it teaching distraction or is it teaching presence? You don't need a grand drawing room from the 1920s. You need intention. And if you're ready to design your home proactively, thoughtfully, in a way that supports who you want to become, that's exactly what we do inside Create Space. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, truly listening. Until next time, create space for better living. Thanks so much for listening today. If you found this episode helpful, the best way to support the show is to follow along and share it with someone who'd love it too. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can become one of our Better Living backers. It's a small monthly contribution that helps keep the show going. And as a thank you, I'll send you a personal note along with a 15% discount for the Create Space course when it launches. You can find the support the show link right in the show notes. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for creating space with me.